Hi, my name is Megan Weber, and I'm an extension educator at the University of Minnesota, focusing on aquatic invasive species. And today I'm going to share with you the story of a citizen science event that we created to help with the early detection of starry stonewort in Minnesota. So if you're not familiar with starry stonewort, it's an invasive algae, and you can see it in the video here. We're just coming out of a native plant bed, and you can see the space that kind of looks like carpet. That's actually starry stonewort, and while it looks like maybe a thin layer covering the lake bottom, that's actually probably about 4 to 6 feet deep with starry stonewort. It's a very plant-like algae. It has structures that look like stems and roots and leaves. And you can get one last look at the invaded habitat and some very sad looking coontail amidst the starry stonewort here. But it's a pretty new invader to Minnesota. It was first found here in 2015 in Lake Coronis, and attached to that is Mud Lake, so both of those at the same time. But then in 2016, this happened, and there was this flurry of new discoveries of starry stonewort in Minnesota, in kind of two different parts of the state. And these all happened towards the end of the summer, maybe August to September. And that left us wondering, are there more lakes in Minnesota that have starry stonewort and we just don't even realize it yet? We thought that was certainly possible. It was still a new invasive species, so there hadn't yet been a lot of education out about identification and the importance of reporting something that looks like starry stonewort. And it looks a lot like some of our native algae, like Chara and Nightella, which meant that it was entirely possible that people had even picked it up and touched it and looked at it without really realizing what they had. Um, and that's what's got us started on this enterprise to create this volunteer citizen science event to help us search the land of 10,000 lakes for starry stonewort. And while we have not searched 10,000 lakes yet, we certainly have been able to do quite a bit with this event so far. And it really does take a fleet to make an event like this happen. We do the central coordination for that here at the university. Our program is a partnership between the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center and University of Minnesota Extension. And we co-developed this program in 2017 with University of Wisconsin Extension and the River Alliance of Wisconsin. And they were looking to take an event that the River Alliance had been doing for monitoring rivers to start to include lakes as well. So we partnered with them to create the lake monitoring protocols, and we now host our events on the same day each year. In Minnesota, we're also partnering with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. They're, of course, the agency that ultimately needs to review the fines and confirm any new detections. The specialists each year also give our local coordinators a chance to touch and feel live starry stonewort so that they better understand what they're looking for each year with what volunteers might be bringing into them. And finally, we have a whole network of local partners that we work with to make an event like this happen. So this is the map from 2020, and each of those yellow stars on the map was a local training site. We had 28 of them in 2020. And each of those local training sites are hosted by one of those local partners, and they're ultimately responsible for training the volunteers, sending them out on their monitoring routes, sorting through the samples that volunteers bring in. And we really wouldn't be able to host such a large statewide event without having these local coordinators to make that happen. And as we're creating these routes, we're really being guided by science. And this is where it's great to have this partnership with the research center. So what you're looking at here is a risk map that came from one of the researchers at the center, Ranjan Muthukrishnan. And he was looking for a way to do some risk mapping based on water quality for how well starry stonewort might be able to survive in Minnesota waters. So it's a heat map basically. So the more red a dot is, the more at risk he thinks that lake might be. So we use the data from this model that Ranjan created alongside local data from our coordinators. For example, they might be able to tell us more about which public accesses get more boat traffic, or which lakes are they able to monitor frequently themselves, and which ones are maybe kind of left off of their typical monitoring routes that could use some attention. And we couple that information with information about other invasive species in the lakes, drive times and such to create these monitoring routes, hoping that we can make these prioritized routes in a way that gives us the best chance of finding starry stonewort if it were to be present in one of these other lakes. And what we've ended up with is this event that really has a growing fan base. Each year, we see more and more participation. We're able to see to visit more and more lakes. Instead of the asterisk on 2020, I'll just add this little coronavirus. We, of course, didn't have quite as many people come out amidst a global pandemic this year, but we were still quite impressed with the turnout that we were able to have with our event. And they were able to still search more lakes than we have in previous years, and there's probably a couple reasons for that. One of those is because we had a few groups of volunteers who all finished their route and came back and said that they had more time and they wanted to do another. So we had a couple of instances where volunteers were doing the work of what two groups would have done as just one. We also had some lakes this year that were more of a focus, that have a lot of public accesses, larger, real popular lakes. So that allowed for more public accesses on a single lake to be visited in that shorter time frame to really kind of boost that public access number this year as well. And these participants are really making significant finds. So in Minnesota, we have 16 lakes that are known to have starry stonewort as of today. And 25% of those lakes were discovered by Starry Trek participants. And they're also finding more than just starry stonewort. So while we focus our training on starry stonewort, we do give some information about other invasive species. And participants since our launch in 2017 have found 27 new water bodies with invasive mystery snails, 6 new water bodies with curly-leaf pondweed, and I will say for both mystery snails and curly-leaf pondweed, because of the way that these two species are tracked, they may have been previously known to be infested, but had not yet been part of that central database. So while some of these might be true new infestations, some of them may not be. And in that case, this event is helping to keep those databases as accurate as possible. For the rest of the species, though, they're fairly well tracked. So we think that these are much more likely a true new infestation. So there's been one purple loosestrife infestation found, one new lake with zebra mussels, 2 new water bodies with Eurasian water milfoil, and just this year, a water body that had Curbicula fluminea in it, which was a fairly significant find in that this water body doesn't have any thermal outfall from, say, a power plant or other raw water user that keeps the water warmer in the winter. So it was interesting to have found actually a few of these clams in this lake when Minnesota is kind of thought to be outside of the range of thermal tolerance for that species. So we're keeping an eye on that and still figuring out what that discovery might mean for Minnesota and that particular lake. But what we're really seeing is that these finds are also making a difference. And with that, I'm going to wrap up with the story of Grand Lake in Stearns County. And this is the first lake where starry stonewort was found by our volunteers. This was in 2017. And volunteers found these 2 fragments that you can see in the picture. This is all that they had. And it was enough for them to say that this looks suspicious. We think someone should look at that. So these were turned over to Department of Natural Resources, and upon further examination, it was confirmed that this was starry stonewort. And when they went back to that lake to further evaluate the lake, what they found was that it was really a small infestation, maybe only an area of 4 by 8 feet. And it was limited to that public access. It hadn't spread to other parts of the lake yet. So the Lake Association, Department of Natural Resources, and the Research Center got together to create a treatment plan and how they were going to respond to this new find. And what they decided to do was to use hand pulling as their control tool because it was such a small space that was invaded. So the first year when they went, they sent divers out and they would fill the mesh bags, like what you see in the picture here with starry stonewort. Divers ultimately pulled 360 pounds of starry stonewort in that first hand pull event in 2017. And they've gone back now a couple of times each year to keep up with their hand pulls. And typically the first pull of the year is the one that has the most starry stonewort in it. So now in 2020, when they came back to do their first pull, they only found a half a pound of starry stonewort. And that's represented by this tiny little speck that you may not even be able to see on your screen if you want to look at a scale comparison to the big 360-pound bag and what they were able to find. So what that leaves us with is really this great success story in early detection, in the use of volunteers for the early detection of invasive species, and in invasive species management. All of which is really great to have in a field where there's a lot of doom and gloom stories. So we think it's really great to be able to have an event like this that can successfully use really motivated and passionate individuals to make a big difference on potentially invaded lakes by making these early discoveries. And with that, I'll leave you with this slide. I'll thank you for listening to my talk, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. And I'd also direct you to our website, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel if you'd like more information as well. So thank you.